everyone. Welcome to another episode of Home Tech. I'm Seth Johnson. I'm joined, as always, by Jason Griffin. Jason, happy Memorial Day weekend, man.
Yeah, you got it. How was your weekend?
It's a vacation weekend.
Yeah. Yeah, we did take the opportunity to kind of have a week off to enjoy some time with our families. And I know, Seth, you had a birthday as well, yeah?
Oh, yeah. I had family in town, a birthday. We took a little trip a day trip to Orlando to go to some of the theme parks there.
The land of theme parks.
Yeah. The city the mouse built.
That's it. Yeah, I had a great Memorial Day weekend. It was nice to just kind of kick back and not think about work for a few days and spend some time with family. And we took our little 6-month-old daughter swimming, actually, for the first time. And that was quite the experience. We had fun. I don't know if she was quite sure what to make of it.
Yeah, well, they here in Florida, that's like a big thing. They toss kids in water and watch them swim around. Like, yeah. It's a thing you have to do because there's so many swimming pools and places for kids to get into.
It's a safety issue at that point.
Yep.
Cool. Well, I'm excited to get back into gear here and sit down with you. We've got a ton of ground to cover, lots of big stories, and we were kind of talking before we hit record here tonight that we are definitely entering the busy season here. We're recording here on a Wednesday night. We actually typically record on Thursdays, but recording on a Wednesday night, which I mentioned because it's relevant, being that Google I/O kicks off tomorrow. So we definitely look forward to keeping an eye on that this week and kind of kicking some of those stories around next week. So definitely tune in for that if you want to get our thoughts on Google I/O. And then, right after that, we roll into Apple's, WWDC, and we got InfoComm right around the corner for our integrators in the audience are probably interested in that. And then, gosh, feel like CEDIA is going to be here before you know it.
It will be a fast couple months here, and then we'll be in Dallas.
Yeah,
just holy cow!
To it.
Yeah,
look forward to it. So anyways, let's jump right in here. We got some Apple news we want to cover. And Seth, I'm going to let you kind of kick this first one off. I think you had some thoughts on this story that you were looking forward to sharing.
Well, there was a lot of news floating around this week. And I hate like rumor news, especially associated with Apple, who hasn't like ever released anything ahead of time. And I guess Amazon's kind of the same way. Google, not so much. Like, you get a lot of info from Google before they actually do anything. But there's always these rumors around. And right now they're talking about all the stuff that's going to be in the next iOS 9, which we're on iOS 8 now. Which Apple has gotten into this pattern of debuting the next iOS version and OS X version, too, the OS 10, at WWDC. So that you can write a story about it and say, oh, it's going to be released for sure. And of course it will be. Like, you're not going to be wrong. So, yeah. But then they throw in all these extra things inside of it that are rumor or speculation, and just kind of see who will click their stories. And of course we get drawn into it because there's something about HomeKit and home automation on it. So,
exactly. Yeah.
But it looks like, they're saying that there's going to be a specific home app, and they're going to set up kind of virtual rooms. It's really not any news. Like, you could have written the same story a year ago after HomeKit came out and kind of made the same assumptions. So I guess there's really not much news. It's just like, hey, we're all getting excited about this thing, so let's talk about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know there's been a lot of contradictory information kind of floating around. Is Apple finally ready to kind of get this thing out into the wild, or is it going to be delayed? And I think you're probably right. At this point, everybody is in the tech world is looking for something to talk about or write about, right? I mean, there's a certain element of that, and especially if you're a full-time journalist and this is what you do, then you've got deadlines and you've got to write about something that people want to read about. And right now, everybody's thinking about HomeKit, and especially with WWDC, which, by the way, is very difficult to say. I think we're going to have to come up with a better term for it.
Say dub.
WWDC coming right up. That's much better. I'm sitting here excited and looking for stories in all my feeds. Like, what are they going to do? And we're finally going to get more specifics. And we've been looking forward to it for quite some time now. But like you said, I think this story is something that you could have predicted a year ago when this all kind of first broke. And I guess for me, it's kind of interesting in that it sounds like this sort of home app, if I'm understanding correctly, is baked right into iOS, and it really, as opposed to how we've traditionally thought about home automation and home control, where you have either a series of apps, like one for your smart lights and one for your lock or whatever, or on the other hand, maybe you've got a dedicated app like a Control 4 app or something along those lines that ties it all together. This is basically cooking it right into iOS. So it may not even, to a certain extent, be like an app from a third party that you have to download. It just is sort of cooked right into the iOS, which I think is interesting.
Well, they already have that with the Health Kit that they released the previous year. And you have this lousy app that Apple provides that gives you graphs and data that I don't understand. There's like carrots in there when I go and look at it. And I'm like, I don't know what these carrots mean, but they're there. And but that's what you'll get. But Apple is providing this database for this platform on the phone. So I guess what they're thinking, you have to offer some basic minimal way of controlling it right out of the box. But I think where we're really going to see things shine is when, first off, all this anticipation is coming, from these third-party hardware developers that are just ready to release their product. When those guys get on the market, and then when the independent developers come out and start making really cool HomeKit based apps, that's when we're really going to see a kind of a revolution around this product, because it's a complete paradigm shift to separate the logic from the interface. Like if you look at smart things, if you look at even point solutions like Google Nest or like a Locatron or something, like they all have their own apps. But if they're HomeKit compatible, you don't have to use their apps. You can use other third-party developer app that has a really cool interface that you like to use and does cool automation things that you like to use. And I think that is really good for the industry in general.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the things, a small point that I think about with HomeKit, and one of the kind of common things that we talk about when you're considering using any sort of app for home control, is that whole, factor of having to wake your phone up and unlock it and swipe or use the fingerprint or whatever it is. And I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, but like, on iOS, how you have those certain functions, core functions that you can access without unlocking your phone. If you just like swipe up from the bottom, you can get to things like the flashlight or the camera and things like that. It would be cool if they could figure out a way, like if your phone was at home and on the Wi-Fi network and you just swipe up from the bottom, maybe you've got some customizable things there that are tied into HomeKit, giving you quicker access to things like lighting control or your lock or something along those lines. Now, obviously, this is just purely speculation. I have nothing to indicate that that's what they're going to do. But this is one of the things that I think about when you start to talk about bringing that control layer, closer into iOS, as opposed to just purely locking it inside of a third-party app.
Right. And that's a good thing, because, well, I mean, if there were that type of integration from either, the swipe up or swipe down or whichever way, Apple, if they give that integration to third-party developers, they'll be able to implement all sorts of cool little things that you could have that quick access that you're looking for. And I think that's great. I mean, just having, like you're saying, having that database on the phone, whether it's constantly being updated or whether it's, updating itself remotely. I'm not sure how well it's going to work. Hopefully it works well. But, that's one of those things we'll just have to wait and see. And I guess we won't have too much longer to wait, because looks like they are there. There were some rumors going around that it was going to be delayed till fall. Those were kind of squashed, and Apple said, no, we're releasing all this stuff next month. So here we go, next month.
So June 8th. Coming right up. Look forward to talking more about it once we actually have some real news and have a chance to see what they're going to do.
Yeah. It looks like there's some rumors about a new Apple TV, the long-awaited Apple TV.
Yes, yeah. And we should draw a distinction here, because we're actually going to talk about both, right? When we talk about these rumors about the Apple TV, we are talking about the actual Apple TV, the one that exists, the little set-top box, versus the long-rumored, actual Apple TV with the glass. And that's something we're going to touch on here in a minute. But yeah, as far as the the new Apple TV that's coming out, interesting story was reading that, kind of ties into this new release. And it looks like they're going to put out what's being called right now, at least in the rumor mill, TV Kit, which is like a third-party SDK for Apple TV app development, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, for the most part, a TV Kit already exists, but you have to be kind of a partner with Apple, and that's where you get these, ABC channels and Discovery channels on the Apple TV. But hopefully, what's really cool, like with Roku, like you can. They have their own partners, or you can sign up to be one of their partners somehow. But you can also just kind of make your own app, I guess, or URL feed or something, and you can get your own channel put on your Roku, which is really cool. And I think if that opens up even just a little bit for the Apple TV, there's a huge market there, lots and lots of potential. And if we see any kind of hardware updates to that little box, I mean, it could be a pretty amazing box to have sitting there doing movie and video things. I can think of all sorts of cool stuff like Plex and things that could run on it and just really be a cool media solution.
Yeah, interestingly, in this particular story that I was reading, there wasn't really any mention of HomeKit, which I thought was kind of a glaring omission, given that we're talking about a TV kit coming out for third-party development. We've got all this news circulating about Apple HomeKit, and I think that there could be an interesting convergence there, right? With people who are developing smart home technology, maybe, using the Apple TV as an interface. We've heard a lot of talk about the Apple TV potentially acting as sort of the brains of the operation and kind of the hub with the radios built into it. Don't know if that's going to happen, and obviously nobody really knows for sure at this point, but I just thought in terms of third-party development, and they're releasing this SDK for the Apple TV, I think that could be an interesting tie-in as well. The story did mention tight integration with the Apple Watch, and in terms of as a control interface, which I think could be kind of useful. I don't know if really we're going to see like gesture-based control, or if you're just going to maybe get like a simple tap or swipe on the screen, does play, pause, fast forward. I mean, that would be kind of convenient, but nothing earth-shattering, right?
Well, there is a remote app for the Apple Watch that talks to the Apple TV.
Got it.
So many
that
things.
Basically does like the remote app that you have currently on your iPhone, right? Kind of the same deal.
Yeah, it does. But the people I've talked to that do have Apple Watches already say it is a killer app. Like, they didn't realize how nice it is to have that remote right there on it. You just reach over and start doing whatever you do. I have no idea because I don't have a watch. It is the killer app right now for them, and they were surprised as to how well it works. So if there's any tighter integration, that would be something just of a bonus, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I could see that. I mean, I oftentimes now, especially having a young one here at the house, and you've got your hands full, right? You're holding a baby or whatever it is, and just having that right on your wrist there where you could just reach over and maybe pause the movie you're watching because something came up and you've got your hands full, I think could be very convenient. But I'll be interested to see if maybe they implement something deeper like gesture-based control or something along those lines eventually.
Well, something they won't eventually be doing is an actual Apple TV. Like, yes. that rumor, I guess we can go ahead and put it to rest, because it was that guy that's been holding out for years, swearing up and down every year, this is the year of the Apple TV.
Yeah, I'm not going to upgrade my plasma. I'm going to wait until Apple comes out with their TV.
Right.
It's one of these things that over time, I kind of went back and forth on it. I think it made sense at a certain point, and now the market has just gotten so commoditized, and that was the gist of this story. I read mostly about it on The Verge, but they quoted heavily from a Wall Street Journal article that basically talks about the reason why the Apple TV was a pipe dream, is what they call it, and sorry, you're not going to get your laser TV. It's just not going to happen, right? And the reason basically that they cite is that Apple's always been a company that's tried to take, they don't necessarily release new products. They were not the first one to release a smartwatch. They were not the first one to release a smartphone. They were not the first one to release a digital music player. But, they've gone into these categories, and presumably they're going to do the same with the watch that they just put out. And they take sort of nascent product categories that are still developing and take it from that to a mature category. With TVs, they were kind of late to the party. And by the time they started looking at it, they really just couldn't find that like differentiator to really drive people towards purchasing their product, because they felt like, okay, well, maybe it's 4K. And according to this article, they were really looking heavily at 4K before it became like a common thing that everyone else was doing. And they couldn't move on it because the prices just weren't there. They couldn't get a product to market at a price point that they felt like people would buy. Now 4K is basically a commodity, right? Like every new TV coming out now seems to have it. And I just thought it was interesting. They just make a lot of good points in the article. And I think really that Apple is more focused on TV. The term TV can refer to a lot of different things. There's the whole business model of distributing content. There's the hardware, there's all these different pieces. And I think they're more interested in kind of shaking up the way things are done on the distribution end. We've heard a lot about their forthcoming service where they're going to have, pay per channel type of over the top content streaming. I think that's really interesting, and just interested to see what they can do with that. I feel like as a consumer, I'm better served by being able to go out and buy like $1,000 or $1,500 really nice TV that does a great job of displaying picture, and just give me some HDMI inputs and let me handle the rest with a set-top box.
Right. I like the boxes so much better because I can upgrade those. And,
exactly.
A TV, granted, the TVs that we have these days aren't exactly built to last like the TVs of yesteryear. They're kind of designed to be replaced every half decade or something. I don't know, maybe a little bit longer. Whereas my parents and we've had TVs at that house that they had for 20, 30 years, and they still worked fine. Now it seems like the cycle for TVs is much higher for people to buy new TVs and get new TVs, and honestly the prices come down to where it kind of makes sense, I guess, to get new TVs. But like I was trying to get back to the point here, like it's much easier to upgrade a $100 or less box and plug it into whatever TV you purchased for $1,000, $1,500, $2,500, than it is just to upgrade a $2,500 every $2,500 TV every year or two. It just doesn't make any sense. So
yeah.
Much easier to use the set-top box model and just pump content in that way. Maybe one day, controlling all that and setting everything up would be a lot easier. And I think, maybe Apple can, they're a billion-dollar company, billions of dollar company. They can do whatever they want, and maybe they can come up with a way to make it easier and just kind of force it on the industry. And but I think we've been trying that for years, right?
Yeah.
So good luck, Apple.
Yeah, I was reading, I read an interesting term that I hadn't heard before when I was kind of reading about this story. And it was, the term was input zero. And basically what they were saying is everybody wants to be input zero. They want to be the first thing when the average consumer sits down and turns on their TV set in their family room, the first thing that they come to, right? And right now, for most people, input zero is the cable box. That's 95% of the time, at my house at least, that's what we're watching. So that's sort of your quote unquote input zero. And really the battle is these companies want to be that default. They want to be the first thing that you go to when you sit down to turn on the TV. And this was always kind of the vision of people who predicted that Apple was going to put out an actual TV. That was sort of the vision that they had. Apple wants to control the whole experience, but I don't see it happening at this point. I think Apple, it makes a lot more sense for them to kind of put resources into a little set-top box and then kind of shaking up the content distribution model and seeing, what kind of headway they can make there.
Yeah, who knows? They may come out with a TV one day, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be anytime soon.
Yep. Well, speaking of TV, this is a topic that we touch on pretty often on the show, and that is the control of the media room. Obviously, a lot of smart home apps coming out these days give you control of the lights or the climate or the smart locks, but still kind of a developing category in the smart home, very much so right now, is that DIY control of the TV and the media room. And Logitech is obviously one of the huge players in that space. And they've been in the news quite a bit lately. And actually, story broke just this week that they put out a firmware update that allows some of their more legacy original hardware to have some of the more recent functionality. So they've had, in the past, they had the Ultimate Hub that was really designed to do home entertainment, control IR devices like cable boxes and TVs. And I think they had some limited control of like Philips Hue and some of these, products like that. But this update now gives that older hardware all of the functionality of the newer, the newer Harmony Home Hub, which was launched last fall, I believe, and gives them Wi-Fi control of things like some of the specific ones they cited were August smart locks, the Nest thermostat. They mentioned Honeywell, which I think maybe the Lyric thermostat. I'm not really sure. Smart Things, Lutron, which we've been talking a lot about lately. And so I think this is a good thing. If you've got an older Logitech setup and you've been kind of watching some of these stories and maybe a little bit envious or bummed out that you needed to go spend the money to upgrade, now you don't. And I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, I love it when companies do this. They have legacy product that they actually care about and care to issue updates on. Sonos has been doing this for years, which, I will praise them for that. They will continually update some of the oldest software that they have. I think I just saw the other day that they weren't going to offer any more updates for like an ancient version of Macintosh software, like 10.6 or something, and that old controller, like the really old controller with the jog wheel.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So they're not going to update that anymore. Which, if you still had one of those working, you're doing pretty good because it's probably a 6 or 7 year old thing.
Minor miracle.
Yeah. So I love it when companies to do this. And then, you know what? I think I'm going to go ahead and tap that a little bit because
I think that counts.
Yeah, there's another hub out there that people may already had in their house, and now they can have some home automation.
Yeah, that was bell-worthy.
I think so. Good job. High five, Logitech.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we'll move on, but I think you make a great point. They could have just as easily withheld this. The thought being that, hey, we've got loyal users, and if they want to do the more advanced home control, they'll go out and buy a new hub. They could have just as easily done that. So kudos to them for supporting the legacy users and getting this update out there.
Definitely. So it looks like Google may be doing something in the home automation market. We'll find out more, I guess, tomorrow. But there's a lot of speculation running around about this project called Brillo, and I think Mike Wolf has been really leading the charge. Yeah, he's been all over this thing. Yeah.
This is an interesting story. I agree with you, Mike's take. Good friend of the show. If you're listening and haven't heard of Michael Wolf, definitely you should. He's on top of all this stuff and always has a really interesting take. And this story had broke, and it was it was all over the place, and people were talking about it in the context of it being this project Brillo is. It basically Google's initiative to kind of come out with a Internet of Things operating system. And a lot of the initial stories were reporting about this operating system being designed to run on devices with, small amounts of RAM. But when they were saying small, they were citing amounts like 64 megabytes or 32 megabytes. And then they were saying this could go into things like wearables or sensors. And this sort of struck Mike Wolf as odd, right? Because I guess if you follow this stuff very closely or you just know kind of the details, that's actually a relatively large amount of RAM for some of the devices that they were citing in these stories. And most of these devices that they were citing would typically run more on something like 128 kilobytes versus like 32 megabytes, which is a very, very big difference. And he reached out to some of his sources and found out that this is actually targeted more, according to his sources at least, towards home router manufacturers, which I think is really interesting, and actually it makes a ton of sense.
Right, we're seeing what's that company, Zonoff, I think, has been kind of pushing that idea for a couple of years now, like putting home automation built into routers. You're seeing that being deployed. I want to say the Comcast like Xfinity product that they have, the X1.
Yeah, I think we saw Verizon doing this as well.
Verizon's doing the same thing, and it's all built into their router. So it makes sense for Google to kind of jump in on this play. And we just talked about this last week with Samsung doing kind of a similar initiative, right? And now we have another huge player, Google, throwing the hat into the ring here. And I think that they could probably. I think they know a little bit about networking and the internet. So putting a little bit of Google into a router may not be a bad thing for most people.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think that there is going to have to be, at least in the medium term, if not the long term, there's going to have to be a box of radios somewhere in your house if you want a smart home. I mean, that's kind of... I don't think we're going to see that one standard to just rule them all. You're going to have things like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and I think Zigbee and Z-Wave will be around for a while, if not indefinitely. And ultimately, there's going to have to be some sort of unifying hardware that's able to speak to all of these devices over their different radios and bridge that gap. And right now, we're seeing that in home automation hubs, things like SmartThings, and there's a dozen of them out there at least, and more coming up all the time, right? That's why we're always dusting off the bell. But I think that it makes a lot of sense for the router to kind of absorb that functionality. I know there's the Almond Plus router from like Securify. That's been kind of a crowd-funded router that's out there. I don't know a ton about it, but I do know that that's one of their kind of selling points, is that it's built to do the functions of a home automation hub in addition to being a router, and it's got like a touch screen interface on it. So really an interesting model. And I think we're going to continue to see more of that. And obviously, like you said, Google throwing their hat into this ring, not a huge surprise, makes a lot of sense.
Right. I know another company out there called Revolve that used to have this really cool product with tons of radios in it. That,
Great point.
Yeah. And I think they were picked up by
in there.
Yeah, they were picked up by Nest or Google. I guess it was Nest. But we all kind of wink and say, "Oh yeah, it's Google." So
yeah. Well, that's actually, since you bring that up, there's so many interesting aspects to this story, and one of the things that I find very interesting about it is that it appears from everything that's out there that this is not at least directly related to the Nest division of Google. This is all being headed up under a separate division. A guy by the name of Craig Barrett is supposedly at the head of this. He's a former CEO of a company called Atheros, and Atheros was a company acquired by Qualcomm who made Wi-Fi chips that went into routers. So, the more you look at it, the more it looks like, yeah, Mike's got this 100% right. Really interesting aspect to that story. But yeah, it looks like something that they're doing more under Android than Nest, which I think is definitely interesting, and not the first time that Google's had kind of overlapping initiatives, right?
Well, it's not really. I guess you look at Google, you look at Microsoft. They're kind of almost the same company now. Like Google has all these departments out there that are kind of just doing their own thing, and then somebody kind of that's what last year's Google I/O looked like. It looked like everybody came in and had their department pitch meetings, and like the 20 or 30 more interesting things floated to the top, and that's what ended up in their like 3 or 4 hour keynote. I don't remember, it was torture, but like it
tried
was
to block it out.
Oh well, it was just like everybody who had an interesting idea showed up and showed off this idea at Google I/O, and it was all really cool stuff. But like there didn't seem to be like this unified, project outlook. Like I don't want to say like Apple has, but they do certainly force kind of tying the hands of what people are working on,
right.
and to kind of have this overreaching goal and an idea that they put out. And you see Microsoft come out with initiatives that look awesome, they look great, and then they just kind of fizzle away. And you see Google do the exact same thing. And I hope this isn't, one of those things. Like we need more competition in this thing. We need more standards and things to float to the top. And these big players are going to be what brings that in for us. And we all will benefit if that happens. And that's the good part. The bad part is if, Google is coming out with something like this now. It's taking the largest, most profitable company in the world. Almost. I guess they are, right? Because they make more money than anybody right now.
Probably
Apple.
Probably right up there. Yeah.
It's like oil companies and Apple. So like it's taken them a year to even get to the point where they can talk about something that they've been working on. So it's a long road, it seems, and I kind of have more faith in what the Nest guys are doing over on that side, with the old Revolve team and everything like that. That looks really cool. Then this could end up in a router, and that's great. And I just hope it's not like one of these separate initiatives and projects that is going to look cool for a presentation at the developer conference, but then fizzles away after that.
Fizzles out. Yeah, that's an interesting point, and obviously something we're going to have to keep an eye on. I just think that to kind of come full circle, the whole idea of building this functionality into a router makes a ton of sense. And it's kind of the proverbial like camel's nose under the tent, right? For mainstream smart home automation, because right now, we sort of get the blinders on because we're so into this stuff. And I'm sure people who listen to the show are the same way. They're into the smart home and they get excited about these things, but you have to remember that it's still such a tiny market really in the grand scheme of things. And a lot of everyday consumers still have no idea that this stuff exists. And if you can build some of this functionality into a router, which is a device that people are going to buy anyways, then I think that bodes well for the smart home market at large, because then it's like, oh, you have this device in there already, here's what you can do with it. And I think that's going to be one of those things that would help to kind of drive adoption in general.
No, absolutely. I think it's a great idea. I just hope it's not one of those things that fizzles out, because it's really cool. So speaking of really cool things, where people have taken radios, put them in houses in things that you may have already had. Alarm.com, which is a company that it's really a software company that integrates with security systems to bring the old school world of open and close windows to the new school world of smartphones and the internet, has filed for an IPO.
They have indeed. Yeah. And it looks, definitely, I'm sure an exciting time for them, right? This is going to be an interesting story to watch in terms of, one of the first things I thought is, okay, I got to keep an eye on this and contrast it to Control4, when they had their IPO. And I know obviously they're different companies, but still similar. And I'll be interested to watch kind of that aspect of it and see how they fare out. But yeah, they've filed their S1 and they look to be moving forward with this. And, some of the numbers look pretty strong. They had a great 2014, claiming $167 million in revenue. So very, large company doing a lot of exciting things. I
think this will dwarf Control4 and what they've done, especially in the last couple months. But Alarm.com, 2.3 million customers with a 93% renewal rate. Now, this is a service you pay for. You pay for it either monthly or yearly or whatever your Alarm.com dealer charges for it. But holy cow, that's great.
Yeah,
it's a lot of customers.
It's strong. And I think really, home security has been always one of these things that's been kind of something that draws people into the smart home. Security's obviously been around forever, and there's a reason for that. It's very, it's highly valued by consumers to feel secure in your own home, and especially like if you're away from home. And I think that convergence of security systems in the smart home is a very natural progression for a lot of people, and Alarm.com has really positioned themselves well to kind of take advantage of that. And I think this shows to me that, there's a term that Julie over at CE Pro always uses, SHAAS, Smart Home as a Service. And I really like that term. I think it encapsulates very well companies like Alarm.com and, companies like Comcast with Xfinity and Xfinity Home, I should say. Companies that are providing these sort of subscription models where you pay them a monthly subscription and they're going to give you smart home functionality that you're, essentially renting from them on a monthly rate. And I think this shows that these smart home as a service companies are the real deal, and they are doing very well in the market. People are willing to pay for these. And I think that, you and I talk about a lot as being professional systems integrators and keeping an eye on the market and what's happening with do-it-yourself technology and all of this. We think it's very important to, keep a pulse on that, stay educated, understand how it's going to affect your business model. And I think that especially in the short to medium term, these companies, these smart home as a service companies represent, I think, a bigger threat to the traditional systems integration model than, something like a pure DIY solution, which I think we're still a ways away from seeing, mainstream adoption of.
Yeah, I would agree. Alarm.com makes something that traditionally has been very hard to implement and do very, very simple. Both from an installer standpoint, it's still harder than it should be. And that's because they are taking basically a bridge from this old, antiquated, lousy alarm product that hasn't changed since 1982 and put this bridge device on it that converts it over to cellular communication and talks out to their systems and their servers. And then they translate all that into the internet. Like this, they're primed to be able to release, a device like ADT and LG did last week or the week before. That just does it all. And then they can just sell the service straight for that. And then you forward, the signals on to the police as usual.
Right.
And they're serious about, integrate with Lutron, QS, RA2, and the Caseta. Wow, how could I forget that one? as well as like the Z-Wave devices. So I mean, it's a big home automation platform. Not what I would consider a premium product because of the way it works. But if all you want to do is, when you're at work and you say, "Oh man, did I turn off the lights and lock the door?" You flip open an app, hit the button, and you can see all that at a glance. Like that's golden. It pays for itself right there.
Yeah, people really value that. You don't have to be a technology enthusiast or a geek to get into that stuff. That's everyday consumer, wanting to protect your family, wanting to protect your home. I mean, this is basic human needs, you wanting to feel safe in your own home, and security's always been a relatively easy sell when it comes to putting technology into the home. I think that, like I said, it's a very natural progression. I will be interested to see, you alluded to the product that LG just recently came out with in conjunction with ADT, right? And they came out with this, it's a kind of an all-in-one camera sensor type of device, similar to Piper, which we saw get acquired last year by iControl, which is kind of a competitor to Alarm.com, right? So there's a lot of this going on, and I will be curious to see how Alarm.com kind of evolves to match that demand for home security for people who don't necessarily want to get into a contract. A lot of people, as I understand it, are locked into 3 to 5 year contracts with Alarm.com based on what I'm reading. And that's the way that works is they were locked in. Alarm.com doesn't sell contracts; they just sell their service. But if you're we're an Alarm.com dealer, so we have a contract for security monitoring for 3 to 5 years. The way that works is the customer signs the contract, and then what we do is we take the signals, route them through Alarm.com, and then from Alarm.com they go to the monitoring station. So we actually pay, as a dealer, we pay two bills: pay the service to Alarm.com, we pay the service to the monitoring station, and the customer only pays us one for that 3-year contract. So that's where I would say yes, most people are locked into a contract, but not necessarily with Alarm.com. Got it. Okay. Well, it's a good point. I'm glad you make it. It's, not being a security dealer myself, I'm not.
It's a strange world.
How that business model works. But, it is interesting. But I do think that, that sort of contract, long-term contract especially, is fading out. I don't know if it's ever going to go away completely, but, more and more people don't want to feel like they're being locked into contracts, right? And I think that it'll be interesting to see if they evolve to kind of cater to that market of people who maybe want to monitor them, do self-monitoring. Are they going to come out with a little product, like you said, where they'll have a camera built into it, and maybe you just have the ability to monitor yourself and call the police if you think something looks awry. I don't know. It'll be interesting to watch to see if they kind of evolve in that way.
Yeah, and for that matter, I mean, you can do that right now with Alarm.com, depending on the security company, the dealer of Alarm.com. We have a number of customers that do self-monitoring. They monitor only through Alarm.com, and it sends them the push notifications and emails when something happens, and then they take action based on what they see through their cameras or, whatever.
Well, I guess school's in session right now with Alarm.com.
Yeah.
Everybody taking notes.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can go the full range. Like, you can go all the way up. And it's just, for the end user, I think it's just a great little product. I mean, they have positioned themselves well, but they also nailed the interface. And I think if you're an end user like I was, and I am in my house, and I am at my office, I could just go on and see if I forgot to arm the office system before I left, and I can hit a button and make sure it happens.
Right.
Which is great. I mean, it's golden when you can do that.
Definitely. Well, interesting story, and obviously one that we will be keeping an eye on. We wanted to close out the show here today with a story that's, I think, near and dear to the hearts of a lot of integrators in the audience. And that is finally a rack mountable solution as an answer to Sonos. Not a Sonos, it's the Denon HEOS line, but we finally have a rack mountable 4-zone distributed audio solution from HEOS. And I think this is an exciting product. We've all been there where we just have a rack stuffed full of Sonos Connect amps. And, at the end of the day, it's a highly functional solution and it works. But we've always just kind of felt like, man, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a cleaner way that we can do this installation. And clearly Denon is trying to kind of cater to that market of professional installers. And this product is a perfect example of that.
If you've ever seen a 32-zone Sonos system, you'll start to wonder, why in the world am I doing this way?
Right.
And I think dealers have been, I know dealers have been begging Sonos for a rack mountable unit for a number of years. And Sonos has always, claimed to say that the dealer channel is very important to them. But they are very, very, very end user focused. As a company, and I'm not going to talk bad about them because they are a great company to work with and they have a great product. But come on, guys, it's right there. Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right on the money, though. They just don't. I don't want to sound too overly cynical and call it lip service, but to a certain extent, they have to kind of say things to their dealer channel to placate us, right? I mean, but we are not their core market. Let's just be honest. Let's call a spade a spade. They are first and foremost a straight to consumer product. And I'm not faulting them for that. They've been hugely successful. They've got a great product, and it's one that we sell a lot of and we stand behind, and we really think that it's a great value for our consumers. But yeah, we do installations that you could just clearly tell that we are using Sonos in a manner that it's not necessarily designed to be used strictly from like a physical installation standpoint. On a software level, it's fine. I mean, we've done massive Sonos systems that have worked extremely well, and we don't run into issues with that. But it's just, yeah, gosh, when you're stuffing a rack full of like 16 or 20 zones of Sonos, it just quickly gets out of control in terms of wiring and just taking up rack space. And this is not the only thing we've got to fit into this rack. We've always got a dozen other items that got to go in there, and you run out of room real quick. And Denon's come out with this 2U rack mountable unit. Looks like it's a 4-zone player, and it goes for $2,500 retail. And this is a good deal, really. I mean, it sounds like a lot of money on the surface, but when you compare it to 4 Connect amps, which would be kind of the functional equivalent, that would run you $2,000. So you're a little bit over in terms of price there, but you also get more inputs. They've got a lot of different features on this thing that you wouldn't necessarily get if you go the Sonos route.
Well, it's a little bit more than that too, because you, like you're saying, you get those inputs. Like you get 4 analog inputs, two Toslink inputs, so optical, and 2 SPDIF, the digital cable, it looks like. Mm-hmm. So there's 8 inputs on this thing somehow. And you also get 4 amplified outputs as well as 4 pre-outs, it looks like.
Yep.
So you could do almost, I mean, this is like an integrator's dream. And unfortunately, now that they've done this, Sonos can't say that they copied them and sued them. So, like, Sonos would have been good to come out with this before.
Yeah,
but
you're right. It is basically a fully integrated audio matrix solution. So you don't just get Denon's Hios with all of the streaming services like Spotify and Pandora. But you also have the ability to hook up like a ton of external sources as well to this thing. So you get a lot of horsepower for your $2,500 investment.
Class D amplifiers, rack ears, active cooling, Ethernet inputs. I mean, this is what an integrator wants. And Denon really listened and really came out. I mean, I can't wait. I want to get my hands on one of these just to see how well it works, how hot it gets. I mean, put it through its paces, because I have projects right now that Sonos would be a great fit for. But this is an even better fit just because it fits in 3.5 inches worth of space. And if I use 2 of these, that's 8 zones of audio, and I've only filled 6 inches of that rack, and I'm done. With Sonos, I'm going to pay a little bit less, fine, but I'm going to use double that, if not way more than that in space. Yeah.
Well, I'm managing a project right now where we're doing a series of, townhomes basically. And they're small units. We don't have a lot of physical space to put our racks. So we're having to use pretty small wall mount racks. And Sonos is one of our main offerings for this series of track homes. And we're just finding that the racks are getting so full. We were just starting to enter finish phase on the first kind of round of these townhomes. And the racks are just getting full, and frankly, as hard as we try to keep them clean, we just feel like it gets so difficult when our rack is just crammed full of stuff, and we've got 4, 5, 6 zones of music. And if we could have got this down and designed it around a 4-zone 2U player like this, I mean, it would have just been a really great solution for this project. So I think every integrator out there listening can probably think of a project right off the top of their head where this would have been a nice option to have. And I hope that it works out. I have to admit, I don't have any experience yet directly with the Hios line, other than our limited kind of demo that we did on the show floor at CDL last year. If anybody's listening that has experience with Hios and can speak to kind of the ease of setup, and I think very importantly, the reliability, because that's one of the things that Sonos is really known for, is being a very reliable, kind of almost bulletproof system as far as streaming goes, as close as you can get anyways. And I'd be curious to hear if anybody's listening and has some direct experience with the Hios line. Definitely let us know. HomeTech.fm/feedback, or you could get us on Twitter at HomeTech Podcast.
Yeah, I would like to know that as well. I mean, it's going to be tough for Sonos to not ignore this, and not do anything. I think that if they did do something, it should be in the same vein here, because wow, I mean, if this becomes a real product, a lot of integrators are gonna swing over to the Hios line. Yeah, definitely.
All right, Seth. Well, I think we can wrap it up here. Before we do, I did want to give a quick shout out. We did get one more patron on board here this week at the $5 level, and his name is Steve Owens, and we wanted to give him his due and give him his shout out on air. Steve, we really appreciate the support of the show. It means so much to us. And if anybody's listening who may not be aware, we do have a page on Patreon, and that's patreon.com/HomeTech. And we will put a link to that on our page at HomeTech.fm as well, if you're interested in learning more. But basically, it's a way that our listeners can support the show. And you can do that for as little as $1 a month. And every little bit helps. We really appreciate it. If you can't, and you feel like if you can't afford that and you feel like you want to support the show, we totally understand. And what you could do to help us out on that front would be simply tell a friend. If you know somebody who's interested in the smart home and isn't listening to the show already, let them know. Help us get the word out. Also, leave us a review on iTunes. We would really appreciate that as well.
Absolutely. We have, I'm not going to go out on a limb and say this, we have the best listeners. We get a ton of feedback from you guys, and this Patreon thing has just been great. I mean, just to get the feedback and the positive movement on that. I mean, it's everything we've been hearing from our listeners almost on a daily basis has just been great. So super excited to keep moving forward on the show, and looking forward to the next couple months in this busy summer that looks like we're going to run into.
Yeah, I will echo your sentiment there about our listeners, and also just say that, stay tuned. We're entering definitely the busy time of year on the technology scene, and with all of these big shows and conventions and conferences coming up, we definitely look forward to sharing all of our thoughts on that. So stay tuned. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you next week.